Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a review of a really fine and interesting series brought to us on CPO Records with Douglas Bostock and the Südwestdeutsches Kammerorchestra Pforzheim. Yes, we can say it faster. The Südwestdeutsches Kammerorchestra Pforzheim. That's what it is. And the conductor is Douglas Bostock. It's British music for strings. Now, I know we've all heard, British music for strings. There are 30 billion records of British music for strings. And I remember so vividly when I was growing up reading gramophone reviews, and it would always begin with, "Oh, yet another in the illustrious list of British music for string orchestra," and "Oh, how lovely it was composed for the Boyd Neal Orchestra in the 1940s, and it's taken its place among the great masterpieces of British music for string orchestra." Or, "Oh, yes, the British classics for string orchestra date all the way back to Henry Purcell and his incomparable feeling for the sonority of stringed instruments." That stuff. But, not, Tovey always said, all's not false that's taught in the public schools. That was his line, or the saying, as the saying goes, because there happens to be a sensational amount of really fun music for string orchestra written by British composers. They did have a certain feel for it and a certain reason to write for that particular medium, because string orchestras, they had them to write for, and the stuff got played. So there you go. Whether you're born in England with a genetic predisposition to write music for string orchestra and a genetic gift, recessive gene, I'm sure, to write music for string orchestra, that I'm not prepared to grant. But for whatever reason, there's a lot of terrific British music for string orchestra. Now, Douglas Bostock has made a career of doing off-the-beaten-path repertoire for the most part. And it has been his misfortune, it really has, because he's a good conductor. It's been his misfortune to do most of this repertoire at the same time that other people were doing it better, either on, he did a lot of things for the Classico label, a sort of budgety label, with the Munich Symphony, which was practically a community orchestra for much of its life. And it's all very reliable and perfectly straightforward, but distinctly second rate, a lot of that stuff on Classico. Then he got to do the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic and a Nielsen cycle, but there were so many great Nielsen cycles coming out. It wasn't fair to him, really, because there wasn't anything terribly wrong with anything he did. You could just find all the same music elsewhere done better. He did some Vítězslav Novák, a bunch of Czech things, and Fibich and those people. You've got all of it on Supraphon. It's difficult to compete with that stuff. Although I understood why he wanted to do it, and I totally admire his efforts to create a niche for himself by not doing the usual stuff. He deserves tremendous credit for that. I have nothing but admiration for artists who can do that. And in this particular series, there are 3 of them so far, and I didn't want to talk about any of them till I heard all 3, and now I have. And so they're all equally interesting, which is really what the point is, and very nicely varied. And it's all off the beaten path British music for string orchestra. People you likely have not heard of, or if you have heard of them, you have not heard these works. And that's what makes this so much fun. So, for example, this is Volume 1, and this is the one we're talking about today. Volume 1 contains, you ready? An English Suite by Hubert Parry. That's somewhat known. It's for strings and nothing else, like all the rest of this stuff. Elgar's Organ Sonata, arranged for string orchestra by Hans Kunstavny, and it's called for some reason Swinnerton's Dream, which helps not a bit in understanding what this thing is. It's Elgar's Organ Sonata, and no one cares about Elgar's Organ Sonata, and it belongs in that wonderful and demented series of things. For some reason these days, things that are written for the organ get orchestrated, and everything that was orchestrated gets transcribed for the organ. Go figure. But that's where we are. So anyway, and then the final thing is a symphony for strings of 1943 by Gordon Jacob. And Gordon Jacob is known more than anything else as a guy who worked with Vaughan Williams, orchestrating the English folk song suite and arranging things and stuff like that. But he was a fine composer in his own right, and his own music is almost never played. So these three works comprise Volume 1, and we're going to play a little bit of each one, just so you get a sample of what they sound like, because they're quite different. And that's what's marvelous about this. It shows the range of writing for a string orchestra in the English tradition, as well as the range of composers who were doing the writing. Not the same old things. No Elgar Serenade, no Vaughan Williams Tallis Fantasia. No. It's all different. No Britten, Frank Bridge variations. I mean, the list is, as I said, legion and endless. So let us begin with a sample of Parry's an English suite. There's absolutely nothing particularly English about this. Parry was a composer of such good taste and humility and earnestness that he sometimes disappears completely. I mean, he's just not that interesting quite often. But this work is full of charm. It's graceful. It's delightful. You would never know who wrote it. It has very little distinctive personality, but that's okay. I mean, it's not supposed to be a major statement where you need to have a distinctive personality. The work has 7 movements, and it's a Baroque style suite, basically. It has a saraband and a pastoral and an air, and it concludes with a really delicious little frolic. That has personality. It's frolicsome. That's the personality. But I'm going to play a bit of the 4th movement, which is smack dab in the middle of the thing. It's a caprice, and it's capricious. I mean, give Parry, whatever his name was, give Hubert Parry, not Harry. Give Parry credit for calling things what they are. At least he did that very, very well. So here's a little bit of the caprice. As I said, charming, just pleasant music. Good quality, pleasant music of a rather anonymous cast. But the craftsmanship is there. And so the fact that it may not be, an overwhelming personal statement is not something you can count against it when you're dealing with a very, very high level of compositional craft. And as you could probably hear, I hope you heard, very, very fine performances. I mean, good playing and lively conducting. It's just a very, very pleasant album. Now, number 2 is the Elgar Organ Sonata, which, as I said, has been orchestrated, for big orchestra. And this is a string orchestra version, and it's, for some reason, called Swinnerton's Dream. I don't know who Swinnerton was. I don't care. I'm not looking. I mean, you get wonderful notes with CPO releases in teeny tiny print. So sometimes I read them, sometimes I don't. So I'm in the woods when it comes to Swinnerton. Please don't tell me. Do not post. No one wants to know who Swinnerton was. We want to know how it sounds. Elgar's Organ Sonata as arranged for string orchestra. And it sounds quite fine, I have to say. It sounds more Elgarian, if anything, because Elgar was a string player, and one of his characteristic sonorities was the way he handled the strings. And it does seem as though his music, in whatever medium is playing it, will sound wonderful when arranged for strings. And, whether that's just inherent in the music or a function of Hans Kunstavny's arrangement, I can't say. But it's a beautiful arrangement, and it's a lovely work. And it just sounds so much like Elgar. It's really kind of cool. Here's a bit of the opening. Well, the old empire didn't last forever, and neither did Elgar's Organ Sonata. It's one of his least familiar, or least played works, although I assume organists do it. And this is a nice way to make it more popular. Finally, we have the Gordon Jacob A Symphony for Strings from the 1940s. Oh, this is very interesting. It's sort of the spikiest piece harmonically of all of them. It's very contrapuntal. It's quite rigorous. The finale is a fugue, and on a rather thorny subject. And it's really not what you expect, because we know Gordon Jacob is an arranger of Vaughan Williams, and we think, that's what he sounds like. Well, not really. This sounds kind of Hindemith-y, if anything. It's rugged, and it's bouncy, and it's quite an interesting piece. And I want to play you the end of the finale, so you just get a sense. It's very well scored. Jacob was a wonderful orchestrator. He had an excellent feel for sonority, and that's also a function of the English school. That lovely sonority for strings, and the way that chords are spaced, and textures are devised, and all that stuff. And I'm picking it up where the pizzicati come in with a bit of the fugue subject. Is the end of the finale. Gordon Jacob's Symphony for Strings. Good stuff. And I like the fact that Bostock sticks the more challenging piece. I mean, it's relatively speaking, it's not terribly challenging, but it's more challenging at the end, so that you kind of work your way up to it, and then you can sit down and let it wash over you, which it did. I had a very, very good time with this disc, and I suspect you will too. So it's English Music for Strings 1. We are going to cover 2 and 3. So don't jump the gun, folks. It's coming. The label is CPO. The performers are Douglas Bostock and the Südwestdeutsches Kammer Orchestra Pforzheim. And you're going to like this. You're really going to like this whole series. I guarantee it. So keep on listening, folks. Thanks for joining me. Take care.